Hi, this is River Audio, and I'm going to show an example about what I was meaning by having records that are mastered with the direct path. So there is no uh, additional, like, multi-layers of compression behind you. I mean, between the source and the recording. It doesn't go through a tape or a digital conversion or whatnot. Just keep the path as short as possible versus recording it on a tape or on a digital, and then just compressing, EQing, cutting, and all sorts of things, doing like many hours of engineering feats to create a sound that the studio engineer or the band or the band's producer thinks that's a unique sound, and it will distance the group apart from the rest of the world. Because, guys, why we have one of the main reasons why we have today so much processing done on audio, on music, is because today's audio reproduction gear that we have, the consumer gear, they are extremely limited. And that's one reason why today those recordings that were mastered on the Altec studio monitors, they don't sound good, not because the Altec had issues in the mid-range at the crossover frequency, which it did have. However, the studio engineers were conscious about that issue and worked around with that. However, the main reason why those recordings don't sound good with today's playback equipment, because the mastering was done on an ultra efficient loudspeaker, and today you are listening to it on a compressed low efficiency loudspeaker. So instead of the hundreds of dB per watt meter efficiency, we are talking about the 80s dB per watt meter. So we are listening to it with 20 dB extra compression compared to what the studio engineers, what the mastering engineers had in mind, and that's why it will sound so anemic and so bad. But if you play those recordings on a ultra efficient systems, you will realize that, oh my god, they are just so much more live and dynamic than those recordings which are compressed to AF. And however, we don't realize how compressed the modern recordings are because our loudspeaker systems are unable to deliver dynamics anyway, so no one misses what we can't have, right? Uh, However, we must not make that error, that just because it is common practice to process the records to death, that compression is a must for everything, low frequency cut is a must. No, it's just a process that ensures that the way it's recorded, it will sound good on low-fi gear. Now I show you the other extreme, and this is a direct metal mastered recording. Yeah, it was recorded in Russia by Melodia, which is a Russian label, and it was a co-production with Melodia and EMI. So you see, manufactured in the UK by EMI Records. So the recording was done by Russians, and also EMI team was there, and they did it together. And I'm showing this because this was a direct cut to the lacquer, and it does not say if they applied compression on it or anything. I think the only compression they applied, um, well, I don't know, maybe they didn't compress it at all, because this is a crazily dynamic recording. This sounds the closest to real life quartet that I heard, and the tonality of the instruments, is like this recording was done in another universe, and this format is totally different from what we know as vinyl. And that's why I am telling you guys that let's look for those recordings that do not have extra compression on them, that do not have extra frequency limiting on them, that were recorded quite directly, either direct metal mastering, or even if it was recorded on a tape but it was not then spliced back, endlessly, was not manipulated endlessly, but from the tape they right away transfer it to to the records, and yeah, to the cutter, to the cutter head. And yeah, basically that's it, that it is possible to record music in without affecting much changes. And of course, the way they recorded this was not like modern recording when they put a microphone close to each instrument, and then of course you have to put a lot of compressor on it, a lot of EQing, because then the tonality will be totally skewed if you are recording it close to the close mic'd, and then it becomes a mess. That's why we need such a cleanup crew. So today a mastering engineer is doing the work of a cleanup crew. You have to remove the mess you have created by individually miking each instrument, and that's impossible to do. All we can do is kind of like mopping up the blood after a murder. The body won't walk away. So the thing to do is don't murder the sound. Put two microphones, capture it as if similarly as our ears would capture the music, because left and right channel need to capture the information not from each of the music, each of the instruments, but the totality of the image, of the acoustic image that all of them project, that the concert hall project, and that will create a lifelike impression of the recording, versus like individually miking everything, processing. Then you have something like a feel of a studio album, like Aha. And I'm not saying it's bad. I love Aha. It's they have some phenomenal music. I just listened to these guys a couple of days ago, and and then it just took me so far away. I was ecstatic, and after I finished the listening the recording, I took it off. Then I realized that I played it with my mono cartridge, and I didn't even notice it that I'm listening to mono. Why? Because when your mono system is set up well, it gives you a 3D image. And if you don't tell people if whether it's a mono recording or stereo recording, there's no really difference in the image. The only thing you notice that for stereo, the image will be wider. For mono, it will be more focused towards the center, but it's not a pinpoint imaging. So if your stereo system with mono, like you are using it as double mono, so exact same thing coming from left speaker as right speaker, and then you hear a pinpoint in the middle, then your system is cheating you, because it's artificially processing the frequencies, so that it's kind of like a sharpening filter effect. If it does a proper job, then like a dual mono, same thing from left and right, it should project you a life-size piano, and there's like a life-size singer in front of it, and then there's maybe a life-size double bass behind it. But they will appear like that they are layered one behind the other, but not as a pinpoint, and it's a Mickey Mouse type of joke story. So anyway, uh, this episode was about vinyl, and about what it is when you have something which doesn't have any unnecessary surgery done during the mastering. And then we have the other extreme, which is the studio album. And unfortunately, nowadays recording engineers, just because they have their complex equipment, everyone feels the urge to just master the sakana, the fish, out the heck out of everything they lay their hands on. But the best way is really to keep it as pure as you can. And then you, when you master it, create a compressed version for marketing purposes, and maybe also save an uncompressed version for high fidelity listening. And the two don't mix and match, so there's a high fidelity road and the modified artificial road, and we can pick one or the other. And if you have to use compression, have to use EQ, then it means that there are flaws in the recording technique, flaws in the microphone placement, flaws in what type of microphones you are using, and and basically these flaws are there. They become your strength when you want to have special effects. Those are all about special effects. And when you want to keep it pure, then you use wide range microphones that can record wide band frequency, and just do with the least changes possible. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you get my drift about LPs, that there's the superlative LP, there's the fun studio LP, and there are junk LPs which still can bring you joy, but they are so far from high fidelity and what the LP has potential for you, that it's really really a far cry. It's just like with digital. There's amazing digital recordings that sound really really good and natural. I have some of those. And there's atrocious digital recordings. And just because there's atrocious digital recordings that have no bass or that have really jittery sound, I do not generalize that for the entirety of the digital genre. And I think we should not make a generalization about vinyl either, because what I have learned so far by listening to vinyl, I have more than 10,000 in my collection, is that I don't think it almost sounds to me that there's no two discs that were mastered or prepared the same way. So, guys, I cannot make any generalization whatsoever on vinyl. Each of them sounds radically different. They have radically different sound envelope, and that's one part of the joy for me, is that when I put on something I haven't heard before, I have no clue what I can expect. With digital, there's a much more constantness, and especially now, if it's an audiophile label, I know exactly, almost exactly, if I put on, let's say, whatever audiophile brand recording that's done in digital, I know how it will sound even before I hit the play button. With records, no clue. So, thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.